Hello and welcome to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, the podcast for all things marketing. And this week we've got another fascinating interview about data. Yeah, you heard that right. A fascinating interview about data. I hope you enjoy it. So I said last week when I interviewed Lucy Halley that we had some great guests lined up, and today is another one of those wonderful guests. I'm delighted to be joined by Mallika Kelkar, CRM and CX Data Director at Iris Worldwide, which is a global integrated marketing agency. Welcome to the podcast, Mallika.
Hello.
Delighted to have you on. For clear interest, Mallika and I used to work together for a good while we were at Iris.
We did indeed.
And I always found Mallika entertaining and interesting company. So I'm delighted to introduce you to the podcast listeners. First thing we do with any interview is just what we call the credibility section. And it's for people who don't know who you are. We've obviously got listeners from around the world. So a bit of an intro into yourself and your background and your career to date, please.
Sure. So you may or may not be able to tell from my accent. Some people can and some people can't. That I'm from New Zealand and moved here about 10 years ago. And that's basically when I started my kind of marketing data analytics career. And throughout that, I kind of realized I just really enjoyed everything about customer journey, CRM. And I've kind of just slowly built this career. I've always been agency side. So, I don't have that client understanding, but I do have that agency background. Definitely know what it's like to be on this side, even though Rob's been on the dark side as well.
I mean, either side thinks the other one is the dark side.
Yeah,
just to be clear, it's from their own point of view. The other one is the dark side. Cool. So I think data and analytics are one of those topics that can be impenetrable, perceived to be a little bit impenetrable by some, and kind of the idea of and discussing this with you before, and the idea of having you on was to kind of help sort of stigmatize is the wrong word, but help kind of translate, give some access and some into the worlds of data analytics and data science and all that and that kind of stuff. And we wanted to start on the area of what I would call experimental design. One of the things that has driven me up the fucking wall for the last, I've been doing this for 20 something years now, is how poorly some brands and some clients are at setting up experiments, performing experiments. So you'll get a lot of people say, I want to learn this and this and this. So I'm going to set up an experiment and we'll run it and we'll just look at what happened pre and post, or a bunch of different things that just don't give you the right answers you're looking for. So people don't want to take control groups, things like that. Do you share the same bugbear that I have, or am I just an angry man? And what do you see as the biggest issues within marketing and advertising in relation to designing an experiment or designing a test?
Yeah, no, you're definitely not on your own here. This is something I've seen before, and it's one of those things where you have the conversation and you have it again and you have it again. And at some point you kind of just have to go, right, okay, I'm not going to win this one.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it stems from in terms of from the client side, but I think you're absolutely right when it comes to especially having that control cell. I think there's that big fear, it seems like, that clients have, or of removing a group of people and not communicating with them. And if I really think about kind of going deeper and being like, where does this potentially stem from? I think is they don't actually know what impact the work they have has. So they're going, oh no, this is going to potentially ruin my next week of sales or whatever. And you're going, well, ironically, you actually don't know that, and that's why I'm trying to set up your control group is to measure that. And so I think, and also sometimes I wonder if they're really that worried about it. There's probably a bit more going on in the business than just this test that they've got to worry about.
Quite possibly. I think the point about a circular reference, which is we don't want to take anybody. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what a control group is, all a control group is designed to do is to kind of what I would call the do nothing case. So if you're going to do nothing, if you were going to not do X campaign, what would happen? And then, if you do the campaign, any uplift that you see versus do nothing, subject to a bunch of statistical tests, which we won't necessarily get into, is the benefit of doing the campaign, the benefit of doing something rather than doing nothing. I think part of it is this. You're right. We'll lose sales. Well, you don't know
exactly
if you're going to lose sales. You don't even know if this works. You just
exactly.
it
And
drives me up the wall.
And I wonder if there's something to do with, like, they've done all this work on, say, a campaign or an email, like, and suddenly you're going, well, I'm going to measure that. And I wonder if they kind of just go, oh, what if they don't get the answer they want to hear? I wonder if that plays a part in it as well. So you're trying to go, okay, in this case, what is the problem? What do we think that the worries of the client are, and how do I navigate this?
I think that might well be it. I think it's funny because I've worked with some clients who are, as a client, who are absolute sticklers for it. And anybody who knows, who worked in my teams at Game and God knows what else, knows that I was completely anal about control groups and making sure we took them. This was back in the days of direct mail rather than email. Maybe it was to do with that. Maybe it was the discipline of, like, I don't mind not mailing a group of people because it's going to cost me money to mail them anyway.
I think, for sure.
Whereas email is cheap as chips, so it's like, I'll just send it. Do you think that control group and the idea of taking a control group, is that the biggest thing you see from experimental design? Is that, like, the one thing that's the hardest to get over the line when you're trying to set up a test, do you think?
There's a few things, I think, and as soon as you just start, no matter what part of it, whether you're talking about, let me do representative sampling, let me do, as soon as I think you start talking about all of these things, it feels like, not that they glaze over, I think they just kind of go, oh, well, I don't understand that. And then maybe they just go, well, that seems like too hard. Put that in the too hard basket. And we're kind of going, actually, it's not that complicated.
No.
If we have everything available to us, like, we can, just give it to us and we can go away and do it and bring it back and tell you exactly how it will work. But I think there's all the different aspects. There's obviously the actual control. There's the, like I said, the segmentation work, the kind of what actually they're testing. I think there's something to be said about not even knowing what their true objective is. Like, kind of going back to basics and going, okay, you have a campaign. Why are you doing this? What was your purpose for launching it? And therefore, what are we here to measure? So again, you're asking hard questions of people who maybe haven't actually thought of it before. So all of it just seems, you start saying incremental revenue and they start just going, oh my God, like, this seems tough. I've already got the email. Can't I just do it?
Yeah. I also wonder if there's a function of, and again, this comes down to email versus, say, something like direct mail, where you don't have intermediate measures like opens and clicks and all those kind of things, that people are looking at the easy stuff to measure. So it's easy to measure opens, it's easy to measure clicks and all those kind of things. Now, there are some cases where clicks might be your response, might be the thing you want, like a newsletter, for example, and it's not meant to drive sales, it's just meant to drive engagement in a piece of content or something. But in general, I think people, it is weird, isn't it, that thing of, well, it's going to be hard. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Sometimes things are hard.
And then, but to your point, with that, clicks are fine. Yeah, because you knew what the objective of that piece of campaign was. But if you don't know it and then you're saying, I'll just use clicks, that's when you go, oh, but that's not actually what the purpose of it is. So a click is meaningless and you're just measuring for the sake of measuring. And I think also, to your other point about direct mail and kind of, maybe the fact that it costs money makes people actually do things with a little bit more rigor. And I think people forget that emails are still coming into your life, like, yes, it's free, or there's economies of scale, once it's set up, it doesn't matter how many people you send it to, but there's still the customer impact of the person receiving it, of people get tired, the frequency of how many emails you're getting and all that. Getting it right is important, and that's why we also do testing. Yes, you could just constantly email people and you'll get the sales, great, but you still had an initial investment, and there's also the risk of exhausting people and it not actually working. Are you, like, doing something detrimental for your business by just doing whatever you want?
Yeah.
So I think people can forget that when it doesn't have that kind of, cost per send type thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other thing we talk about is it's this kind of last click attribution thing
Mm.
that people are fixated on. And one of the conversations I've always had, even again client side, but also where you've got a multi-channel, say a retailer, bricks and mortar and
Mm-hmm.
online, is that there's a fixation with like, well, how much traffic are you driving to my site? Like,
Yeah.
well, we might not be driving traffic to your site. We might be driving traffic
Mm.
to your store. And are you measuring that? And how do you measure that? And
Yeah.
the only way to measure that, assuming you've got some way of identifying the customer in the store, like a loyalty
Mm.
program, is through incremental, and identifying that kind of stuff. So you kind of like, it's a weird one when you've tried to convince people in the past to do a control group.
Mm-hmm.
What messaging has like worked the best for you? Because I know it doesn't always work, and I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying.
No.
Eventually, you're just kind of like, all right, fine, you're the client. We don't think this is right, but we'll go with it. But what's worked the best for you?
I think, first of all, it's trying to get in their head kind of what the concept is and making it just as simple as possible. But I think sometimes it's about how you business case it. I think trying to put some, dollar signs to it, because at the end of the day, if that's what they're trying to do, they're saying we're not going to do it because it's going to cost us. You almost have to like try and flip it and put a bit of a scenario together and saying, by the way, how much did this email cost to create? How, and kind of think of it in that way and go, okay, if this email didn't bring you any more purchases, then if you hadn't sent it, what are you going to do? And like, how do you kind of build that block of going, or just doing some kind of, back of the envelope kind of going, okay, well, let's do a scenario with the people you didn't email. It's not a like for like thing, and kind of go, okay, like, look, this is kind of showing something in terms of what a potential incremental is this working, and then you give the 100 caveats of why that's not an acceptable way of doing it, and you hope you get through to them. But I think at the end of the day, if you can't get through to them, it's about trying to do the kind of best scenario, best analysis you can to give them that understanding. So making it as scientifically sound as possible, and kind
do
of
what
just
you
going,
can.
okay, yeah, exactly. So, I've done that before where you've kind of gone, okay, you're not letting me have a large enough control, but when I present you with the results, it's going to be caveat asterisk city with, me being like, oh, but you can't use any of this because, none of it's meaningful.
Yeah. I think I was lucky that, having gone through, I have a very long time ago, and I had a qualification in stats, and I had a boss. My first ever boss was a stickler for this kind of stuff. So I think there is to me an element of, whenever I see training or CRM training or those kind of things, it's never really about this stuff. Never really about how you set up an experiment or how big a control group should be. And just for the record, everybody, it's not always 10%. There are things.
Absolutely, yeah. We're saying 10, but it's not.
Yeah, there are other factors that impact that, and I think I'd love to see a bit more training on this kind of stuff, because this stuff, this is maths. It doesn't change. And I think it's such an important part of a CRM or any performance marketing, search, paid digital, whatever it is, toolkit to understand this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I just don't think it has to be as scary as people make it out to be. I think, I don't think you do need a kind of stats degree in order to do this stuff, in terms of, if this isn't your main part of your job, but to understand it, I think you just have to be open. And I think the person explaining it to you, so our job is to kind of put it in real world terms for them and just explain why, you can and can't do it that way. So it kind of has to come from both sides. We need to de-scientify our wording, and they need to just be a bit more open and say, okay, I'm open to like learning this.
Sure. And I think, so let's say we set up an experiment and we run it and what have you, and your obviously job is to interpret the output and kind of come up with the what, the so what, and the now what, however you want to describe it. when you're interpreting customer analytics or the output of an experiment, what are the kind of biggest issues or mistakes people make? There's always the classic conversation of kind of correlation versus causation, for example.
I think if we go back to setting up of the experiment, I think there's people not setting up the experiment correctly. So say if you weren't able to be a part of that, and suddenly, you're doing the interpretation and you're going, okay, well, mathematically, I see X, Y, and Z, but you realize, oh, okay, there's actually a flaw in the experimentation. We accidentally emailed a group of people we weren't meant to, and that's obviously going to have an impact. I think for me, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see.
Right.
Is not even before you even get to the interpretation, and if you may have convinced someone to do your control cell everything, but then when they actually get to setting up and having the test launch, it's then not almost I think again, kind of with the whole people might be a bit afraid of the math side of things. They can't envision what the impact of what they're doing will have on the results. So they'll kind of go, okay, yeah, I sent an email, blah, blah. And we're thinking, oh no, like you completely just messed up our test.
Yeah.
Because I can't say for certain now that this has happened because you've put in another variable that I haven't accounted for. And so I think there's a lot of that going on, and not a lot of understanding of, well, could something have happened anyway? What was what happened as a result of the action we took? So there's a bit of that attribution of success of, oh, well, this must be due to what we did. And you go, not quite. Or the understanding of kind of like I was saying, caveat city of going, okay, but the sample size was too small. Yeah. Okay, the response rates weren't quite enough. These results aren't actually the result of doing something. It's not statistically sound. You can't actually take anything from this.
Yeah. Or somebody didn't take a random control group.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's so then you realize, and you go, oh, this is interesting. Why is this? And you look into it and you go, oh, you overrepresented in one group, and now again this is completely invalid. Or you can there's ways to kind of try and fix that in post, but there's only so much we can do. The numbers are the numbers.
Okay, so we've talked about interpreting results, setting up experiments and tests properly, and as a whole you could talk for a very long time about that whole thing. One of the things that I also think can kind of cause people to be a little bit nervous is working with analysts and data scientists, especially if you don't at least speak part of the lingo required. So when you're working with, let's say, your agency side, you're working with a planner, or you're even working with a client, what do you see as the kind of main mistakes that people make working with non-data specialists, or they're working with data specialists, and what tips would you give for doing that in a better way? Any kind of do's and don'ts relating to briefing projects and briefing analysis, I guess?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've seen over time with like the different ways at different companies, planners or non-data specialists, like the client or account managers, when they work with data teams, they will almost get too specific too quickly, and they don't have the conversation. I think maybe, and I don't know why they do it, whether they just go, oh, I think I know I need this number. The data team pulls numbers. And I think they almost misunderstand potentially what our role is. And it's like, actually, what we need is the full background and context of what is actually happening. What are you trying to achieve? What is your hypothesis? What is all the background? And then that's when we can work together to say, okay, this is what you're trying to get to. I will come up with how we do it, and it will be sound. We don't even need to almost discuss that, because I know what the background and everything you need is, and I know what the answer you're trying to get to is, and what you're going to do with it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, because a lot of times people will come and say, hey, I need you to calculate this for me or find this number for me. And then you'll kind of do it and go, well, I've got actually no other context. My solution isn't well-rounded because I've given you the answer. The answer is 4. I don't know what else to tell you because I don't know what you're doing this for. Or you kind of go, what are you going to do with this? Because a lot of the times also, when you know the context, you can go, okay, I'm going to tell you 4, but I know you're going to come back to me and ask me this very next
Mm.
question. Because actually, in order to activate it or use this to do something, you need a lot more information than that. You need to know whether that's good or not. You need to know what the benchmark is. You need, like, you need
Mm.
any context of how we got there or who's the cause of it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is like allowing that space for that conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not taking away from, the non-data specialists, the people who are creating the strategy or
Mm-hmm.
creating the campaign or anything, but it's having that then flow between them, and you can ask them, get that background, get that
Mm.
context, and go, I see what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Like, allow me then to have the space to just go and do that for
Mm.
you. Just don't be too prescriptive.
One of the things I always equated it to was, if you were briefing a creative, you don't say to them, I want it to be on a green background with this font and this. Well, some people do, and they're morons for doing it. But they're very prescriptive about the creative they want to see. And I'm like, well, what's the point in giving it to a creative? Who's going to,
Yeah.
actually what a creative wants is some constraints or some guidelines and a great creative proposition, and let
Yeah.
them go. And one of the things I wonder, from a data perspective, is it better to say, okay, here's the context, here's the question I want answered. So not specifics,
Yeah.
but like, I want to know when people churn or when people are leaving or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. You tell me how I should define churn, what that should look like, what graphs. Don't say I want this type of graph and these.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can have those conversations where if a client, and maybe a client that intimately knows their business, there might be some stuff that you don't know and things like that. But in general, I always thought, almost treat data specialists almost like a creative. Just give them the context and a question.
That's such a good analogy. I really like that,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, because I think even with the churn stuff, so I
Mm.
think, maybe they feel the onus to kind of come up with what they need, but actually, we can help even before that, because we can kind of, say what we can get for you to help you answer what that problem is.
Yeah.
But yeah, like with the churn thing, yeah, absolutely. It's about going, okay, context. This is the business. And like you say, the client knows, or the client managers, they know their clients. So they can come to us and give us a great amount of background and context and say, look, this is the problem. This is the industry, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is everything you need to know from our point of view. People are leaving. Something's going on. We need to know what's going on. And then we'll go, right, we've got a method to do that. Does it, we can say, does it need to be, and what kind of way the person's going to use it? Is it going to be going into something fancy? Is it to help you with profiling? There's so many different ways, and we can just figure that out.
I'm going to make a sweeping generalization now, which is never a smart thing to do, but I'm going to
Excellent.
do it anyway, which is, in the experience I've had working with some amazing analysts and data scientists, the best ones, the ones that really stand out, don't just do the maths. They're able to stand up in front of a client or a business and sell the narrative, sell the story.
Absolutely.
A lot I've worked with are more do the maths bit, and then it kind of stops there. So from your perspective, you're talking. If let's say you're talking you use this platform to speak to other data specialists. How important do you think that ability is, if you want to progress as a data analyst, as a data scientist, the ability to sort of create and sell a narrative?
I mean, there's definitely people that don't need to have that, because they could, that kind of skill set. There's definitely, the more technical route, they can be, the data scientists working kind of behind the scenes. But I think if you want to be an analyst, a consultative data analyst, I think that is a hugely important skill, because again, with people potentially fearing the analytics, the numbers, they kind of might tune out, but also it doesn't mean anything to anybody else. It's, you can say what you want, but if there's a like someone is trying to solve a problem, your numbers won't necessarily help. That's a step towards answering the problem, but that's not actually helping them answer the problem. You then need to go, right, what have I learned from that, and therefore what can people do off the back of that? So when I'm talking to kind of my juniors, and I'm saying, we need to be pulling out insights and pulling out insights. And, it kind of, something I say to them is like, is that a fact or is that an insight? Facts are easy, right?
Yeah.
This is a graph. The thing went up. This is what happened. And you're like, great, you've pulled out loads of facts.
Yeah.
But I can't take that anywhere. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help me answer the problem. It doesn't make me go, okay, so, I always say to everyone, I just go, so what? That's my favorite thing to say. I go like, so what? If we think about back to the problem, what is that fact that you just told me? What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and that's agree. And, you have to do a lot of the facts first because you need to, trawl through everything. But our job is to then take away all of the things that mean nothing, and actually pull out the bits that kind of tell that story and answer the objective and pulls in that human element. Because that's the other thing. Again, numbers are just numbers, but you got to, when you start hypothesizing, that's when you take it from, the number is 4 to going, right, what does that mean to the customer? Why might they be behaving like that? Or how can I use that to better meet their needs or tailor something better? And that's when you start going from, I think, the facts and just pulling out things to starting to create that narrative.
Yeah, I would agree. I would completely agree. I think the other thing that stands out for me is having a view on the so if you're recommending something, make sure you understand the commercials and you understand the business. I've had people plans, we should do this and that. I'm like, well, that'll completely knacker our margin, or something along those lines. But I think that's really important. Talking about numbers for the sake of numbers, I would wager you've been asked to build a dashboard of some sort. Once or twice in your career to identify maybe just kind of key performance indicators and how they're tracking versus targets or campaign performance or a bunch of different things. So everybody seems to want a dashboard. And in some cases, I think they can be super useful. And in others, not. And they end up kind of being underused or just ignored. What do you think are the good things about having a dashboard? And what do you see from building? What are the biggest pitfalls you see? Either building them or people actually then trying to use them?
Yeah, great question, because I love a dashboard. I think there's such great tools, right? And also you can make them look really good and snazzy, and these days they're so good. But I think they there's the whole, it has to be done well. And what does that mean? If you want a dashboard to be a useful tool, well, it's all about the prep and the planning beforehand that I think people skip. You might get someone that's like, cool, dashboard numbers, I've thrown them in, I've done all these things. And you just go, okay, but what do I get from this? And kind of going back to, our experimental design and kind of going, what is your objective?
Yeah.
So, and I think there's all the different ways. So there's, what is your objective? What is your business trying to achieve from the activity you're doing that I'm trying to measure? Great. That gives me the ground rules of what needs to be in this dashboard, because these are things you're going to be measured against. And then there's the other side of it of going, okay, well, who do you report to? What do they need to know? What is your obligation? So it's almost like being on the client side and going, hey, I know that if these are your objectives, you're going to be answering to someone. How can I best allow you to have those numbers and produce them in a way that will do, the technical part, and you just get to show off the great numbers, and then going, okay, day to day, now what do you need to do? What do you need to know? How do you make your decisions, every day? That's all the tactical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think if that's not the kind of work you're doing beforehand, that dashboard would just be numbers, because you will build it. You'll kind of go, oh yeah, that looks like a number I need. Oh yeah, that's great. And then a couple of weeks later, you'll just be like, I don't use this for anything, because actually day to day, I don't ever use this number. I thought I needed it over time, split by everything. But that's not actually true. So I think, it needs to be prepared really well. And you need to also then realize it's a means to an end. So this isn't going to give you your insights, your storytelling, etc. It's a way of getting all the numbers you need to know to do your job well. And then you go, right, okay, now that I know these things, what do I do with them? It's basically allowing you to skip the whole full-on analytics part every time when you've got a preset list of things that you're going to want to know and need. So, and also allows you to think more about that objective, going, okay, well, as a business, I'm segmenting by these things. These things are important to me, so I need to track them. Oh, should I just cut it by this? Take a minute. Do you do anything with that? Oh, I can do it by gender. Yeah, you can do it by gender. But do you do any targeting by that? Or, obviously that's not a great example, but
no, I know what you mean. Useful.
It's just,
make sure it's useful, not interesting. Well, I did be useful and interesting, and I think it ties into what you were talking about before, which is we're working on something for a client at the agency I work at the moment, and there's two things. One is making sure the numbers are right, but also what is the so what and the now what. And almost it's great having a dashboard, even if you've got like a real-time dashboard, but I think every now and again you need to stop and add the so what and the now what to it to say, okay, well, we're behind on X number versus target. Well, why is that? And what are we going to do about it? I think there's this weird thing about, even when I was client side, there's a weird thing that there's this inexorable movement forward. We've done that campaign, we're on to the next one. We've done that campaign, we're on to the next one.
Yeah.
They're loath to spend too much time seeing what happened beforehand, and looking at that, because there's always crap, we've got to deliver the next campaign. It's always
there's no feedback loop.
No, I would completely agree with that. There's no kind of there's no structure to that. And I think ultimately, if you don't have that so what and now what, they end up just being a white elephant, just something that sits there being run that nobody is using, which is would be a real shame.
Money well spent.
I'm really glad I engaged Mallika to build this thing.
It's like, great, I've never used it. So
no, not using it. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. Make sure the numbers are right. Make sure it's things you're actually going to do something with, and make sure you're building the kind of so what and the now what off the back of it. And it's not just doesn't sit there like some weird monolithic tool.
Exactly, because if it doesn't help you get to the so what now what, it's just numbers for the sake of numbers.
Yeah, it's facts, not insight, to use your
terminology
from earlier. Look at that, bringing it around the full circle.
That's excellent.
Well, that's been a really interesting chat. Thank you. It's I think data. There's so much more we could talk about. We could spend hours talking about segmentation and predictive models and AI and all those kind of things. But I think we've talked about things I think that are the basic sort of building blocks of being able to access and use your data to create insights. What are how do you build create an experiment? What are why are control groups important? How do you deal with analysts? And then the fashionable. I meant that in a nice way. And then dashboards, because you have to deal with planners like me. So that's been really useful. Now we've been building this thing, Everybody Hates Your Brand Marketing Room 101 now, and every guest who comes on, we like to ask the question. What is something that annoys you about marketing or even business or agencies or whatever it might be in this kind of realm that you would like to see locked into purgatory in room 101 for all time? What is your nomination?
Oh, I mean, this is a tough one. so many things annoy me.
Yeah.
I think if there was maybe just that fear of numbers, that like saying that you're data driven or saying that you have got data, and then going, well, you actually don't, because at the end of the day, you don't look at these numbers, you're afraid of them.
Yeah.
and I think I don't think people have to be as scared as they are to it. I've seen so many people tune out, or I'm presenting something, like getting something checked by someone, like either in client side or client team, and after a while they just go, oh, I don't know, this is all too complicated for me. I'm going, oh god, like it really isn't. Like, but I think it's a fear rather than an actual, like, them not understanding.
They almost kind of, the shutters come down immediately when you start talking about numbers.
Exactly. And instead of asking, because it might be, the thing is also, if you don't understand something, sometimes the blame also lays with the person explaining it, right?
Yeah.
I think we forget that if we don't understand something, it might not be always the fault. So you just got to go, sorry, I did not understand. So it's like letting go of that fear of numbers, letting go of that fear of asking. Ask a data analyst.
Yeah, I think that fear of I think that's something I've learned as I get older, which is not to be afraid to look stupid.
Yeah.
Not to be afraid. There's a great scene in a film called Margin Call, which is about the banking crisis of like 2008, 2009, and Jeremy Irons is this like top dog at this bank, and he's asking one of his sort of subordinates to explain a situation to him, and he says, "And please talk to me as you would a small child or a golden retriever." And I kind of think clearly he's at the top and he's got no ego in terms of related to stuff that's more complicated than him. I'm like, even if you think it's a dumb question, ask it anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless that person you're speaking to is an absolute dick, no one's going to laugh at you. You know?
No, absolutely. And that's, again, with the junior team, it's like no one ever goes, oh, can't believe you're asking me a question. Or goes, oh, and if they did, like you said, they're a dick.
They're a dick.
They should not be doing that. But the likelihood is, if you're going, like, sorry, I don't understand what you're like, what are you saying to me? Again, because if you don't understand something, there's a reason for it. A, you can't be an expert on everything.
Nope.
You will have questions. I have tons of questions that I ask all the time because I don't know. I'll just be like, oh, like it's a classic thing when there's like a meeting and people are going up around spouting acronyms and you just go, I have
no idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right? You don't know the acronym. Are you an idiot for not knowing? No. Yeah. Because
you just
that's
never been
not
taught
your
it,
client.
or you never been asked it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, just letting go of that fear, maybe that fear or the ego or whatever it is.
Don't worry about
that away.
Yeah, don't be worried about looking like an idiot, because you're probably not. No, I guarantee you, there's somebody else in that room who is going to go, Christ, I'm so glad they asked that question.
Absolutely, yeah.
Without question.
And I think, and isn't it the thing, like, ask a silly question, be silly for a minute, don't ask it, you basically be stupid forever, because you'll never know, and it'll get to a point where you just will feel like you just cannot ask anymore. You'll bluff your way through it and people will know.
And on that profound bombshell, I will say yes. So fear of numbers or fear of looking stupid / whatever in relation to something like numbers, we will absolutely put into Marketing Room 101 along with everything else that's gone in so far. So that's a worthy addition. Thank you very much for that. And also thank you very much for spending the time to come on to the podcast there and have a chat with us. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I am always happy to talk data.
I might take you up on that again at some point.
Oh, don't you worry.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Let's chat Excel next time.
Yeah, we'll just do it. We'll just literally do it in pivot tables.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Well, an interesting interview there, and I think an interesting look into the world of data. Hopefully we made data a bit more accessible, debunked some myths, talked about some interesting stuff, and made data seem less daunting. Thank you for listening. Another interview coming up soon, which I think you'll really enjoy. So take great care out there and be vigilant.